Still figuring out life? Good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm Mary Choi Kelly, PhD, mom, leadership coach, and C-suite veteran with 30 years of helping leaders thrive. On this podcast, Fresh Out and Figuring It Out, we give young adults the mic so they can share their stories and everyone listening can understand who they truly are and what's on their minds. We're also showing the real side of young men, one that defies stereotypes, so that we can rewrite the story together and help every young adult, both men and women, grow into confident, compassionate leaders who know their worth and lead with heart. Follow the show. We're figuring it out together, one story at a time. Hello, friends. Welcome. Thanks for joining. I've been dreaming about this podcast for a really long time. I want to say it's been years. And over the years, I kept finding reasons to wait, reasons why I shouldn't do it. All the typical excuses of life's too busy, the timing's just not right. I'll do it next year. And it just kept getting pushed off. And so I had to ask myself, really, why am I not doing it? And if I'm really honest, deep down, I knew it was fear. It was fear of being vulnerable, of putting myself and my voice out there, of being judged, of people not liking it or not liking me, or not getting it just right and perfect. And what's funny is that I have no problem speaking in front of an audience of hundreds of people. I do that all the time. But that's because it's work mode. That's work, Mary. That's easy. But this is me with no title, no filter, just putting myself out there. And I have to tell you, it's really stretching me. It's putting me pretty outside of my comfort zone. And that critical voice inside my head is really working overtime. So no surprise, this isn't about being perfect. It is not going to be perfect. But what it is it's going to be real. And right now, my heart says it is time. So here I am, ready or not, here I come. So let me tell you a little bit about kind of the background. I mean, this podcast for me is a passion project, and it was really born from love. Love for my sons, love for the incredible young adults I have the privilege to know, and love for the future that I believe they are already building right now. Because here's what I see. The world is messy, it's loud, and frankly, it's exhausting. The news feels like a never-ending stream of bad headlines. There's so much negativity and too much focus on tearing people down rather than lifting them up, right? I mean, isn't that what you see? It's what I see. And I know that I can't fix all of that, but this is something I can do. I can create a space where young people are heard, they feel understood, and are celebrated for who they are. Our young adults, Gen Z, millennials, and they are not just the next generation. They are this generation. They're already here, shaping the culture, the conversation, and the future. And I'm talking to all of you right now, the young adults out there. I really want you to know that it is you that inspires me every single day. The young adults in my life are truly the people who inspire me the most. In my personal and professional life, every conversation, every hangout, every time I just listen to them, I learn something new. When I speak to a class of college students or engage with them at events, I'm really in awe of what they're doing, how they think, how they engage. And they are the ones that give me hope for our future. Because I'm telling you, we could use a little hope right now, right? And through this podcast, I want to pass that hope on to all of you who are tuning in and listening. So you might be asking yourself, Mary, if you've waited this long, why are you doing it now? And I will get to that. But before I tell you why I'm starting this podcast, I want to tell you a little bit about me and where I come from, because my why is really woven into every part of that story. So let me jump in. I was born in South Korea. Some people are surprised that I was born in Korea. I was. And my parents moved to the US when I was 1. So that was 1971, and I'm 55. I'm considered a 1.5 generation Korean American. And that just means that I'm not fully first generation and not quite second. But, I found some interesting information about the common traits that characterize the 1.5 generation Korean Americans. And I wanted to share that. First, they say that we can speak both languages and that we have strong ties to the Korean culture, and we're also highly adapted to American norms. Second, we often serve as a bridge between our immigrant parents and the American life. And finally, we may experience identity conflict or feel that we're not quite Korean enough or not quite American enough. And I really do relate to all three of those characteristics. I feel like my entire life I've straddled two cultures. I can read and understand Korean, and I speak to a certain extent, but it's probably a stretch. I think people would probably say my vocabulary is generously around first grade level, but I can pass. I can probably get around. I can order food. Still, my Korean culture is a huge part of who I am, and it always has been. And I have to say, it's been a part of who I am even before it was trendy to be Korean. And as a side note, I think it's super funny that the Korean culture is so popular and it's everywhere right now. And it's even viewed as cool because that certainly was not my experience growing up. So let's keep that going. Growing up, I lived in two worlds, and those two worlds didn't always mix. At school, my friends would say that when they closed their eyes and listened to me talk, I sounded like a blonde valley girl, like totally awesome. I'm a Southern California girl, so of course I sound like a valley girl. And at home, I was filling in as the family interpreter. I filled out all sorts of forms and documents for my parents. I made their phone calls for their appointments. And in middle school, I started writing my dad's annual performance reviews for his job at Boeing as an engineer. And that's really funny too, because as an HR and talent management executive, I'm responsible for developing and implementing performance management systems for large organizations. So I don't know, maybe I just got a jump start on my career in a classic Korean way. So regardless, the theme of not being enough is one that you are going to hear more about a little bit later because that is a big theme for me. But for now, let me get back to my story. When my parents first immigrated to the US, we lived in Chicago. And I don't have a lot of memories of my time there because by the time I was 7, we moved to Southern California, to the city of Orange in Orange County. And my parents decided to move to California to get out of the cold. Thank God, because for those that know me, I hate the cold. I'm like cold all the time. Even in California, I'm freezing. And they also moved to California to get close to my aunt, my dad's sister, who lived in Orange County and had immigrated to the U.S. before us. So I grew up in Orange County in California, and my parents actually still live in the house I grew up in, and they have no plans to move, is what they told me a few days ago. So it'll be really interesting since my dad turned 89 this year and my mom is 82. So stay tuned on how that works out. My parents, I would say, have always been very traditional, very, very traditional. In my house, boys came first. I have an older brother and a younger brother, so I'm the middle child and the only girl. Feelings and emotions were not shown or discussed. And there really was no talking back to your elders really ever on anything. So that means there weren't many hugs or I love yous when I was growing up, nor were there many conversations or discussions. As kids, we really didn't have many choices or options on most of the decisions that impacted us. And here I was living in Orange County, assimilating and adapting to the American culture and the very different norms and expectations that teenagers live by. I was super curious. I loved being around people. I had a point of view. And let's just say that I was someone who pushed the boundaries. I was willing to take the risk and willing to speak up. And I'll share a quick story to illustrate how different the two cultures were for me. One night, when I was frustrated with my parents for not allowing me to do something that I really wanted to do, this time I decided, you know what? I am going to have a conversation. I am going to raise my issue with this. And so my dad and I were talking, and I shared with him how I felt and why it was important to me. He asked me, why do you want to do that? And so I naturally said, well, I want to do that because I want to be happy. And he looked at me just stern cold and asked me, what does happy have anything to do with life? I mean, just think about that. He said, what does happy have anything to do with life? And for me, it had everything to do with life. So I will never forget that conversation because it was in that moment that I knew we were coming from completely different planets. Like we saw life completely differently. Our values were so different. And therefore, how we evaluated situation, made decisions were completely different. And from my dad's vantage point, being happy was never a consideration in his life. He grew up during the Korean War and he lost his dad when he was 9. He was the oldest son. So, being the oldest son, he had the responsibility to take care of his families. He dropped out of school and began working on the farm to provide for his family, which was my grandmother, his mother, and his 2 sisters. His focus, his entire life, was on survival. And that really continued even when we moved to the US. They moved to the US and didn't know the language, halfway around the world, left their job, all their money, all their relationships, their family, and had to start over. My dad started working as a janitor and he had a degree as an engineer. So it was quite a risk that they took. It's interesting because as parents, mine included, and we all want to provide a better life for our kids than what we had growing up. And I think that's many of our goals, right? And then it happens, and great, my kids have a much better life than I had, and I had a much better life than my parents had. But then you realize that you're almost living in two different worlds. And hopefully, it's not as dramatic as the difference between my dad's experience and mine, but I still see it even in my kids and the life that they live compared to the life that I had. So, growing up, I was exactly the opposite of what a good Korean daughter looked like. A good Korean daughter is someone who is obedient, soft spoken, demure. I was none of those things. And looking back, now that I'm a parent, I realized that I was quite a nightmare for my parents. So I'm sorry to my parents. Picture this. Instead of coming straight home after school, which is what was expected, I was a cheerleader. I was running around, jumping around in a tiny skirt in front of large groups of boys. Like that is what I did for fun because that made me happy. My poor parents, thank God they never witnessed this because if they did, they would have been horrified. But, early on, I knew that if I wanted even a small chance to do what I wanted to do, like be a cheerleader, I had to meet or exceed my parents' expectations around education. Because there was one thing that was super clear for all 3 of us: education. My parents drilled it into our heads that the only reason they left Korea, leaving everything behind, was to provide us a better opportunity through education. I learned quickly that I need to perform, and perform I did. This was actually the easy part. If it was to achieve something, I set a goal, I achieved it, and that was kind of on repeat for most of my life. And all 3 of us, my brothers and I, earned PhDs. Education became my ticket to independence. If I told my parents that I had something I had to do for school reasons, and sometimes, yes, I stretched the definition of what a school reason would be, but I learned to be very resourceful. So if I could tie it to something around school, then I had a much higher probability of being able to go. So that's what I did. And I learned the rules of the game and I learned how to win that game. Straight A's, fine, check. Top of the class, fine, check. Corporate promotions, got them. I checked every box. And, that worked for a really, really long time. I was valedictorian when I graduated junior high school. I was top 5 of my graduating class in high school. I went straight to college and then from there earned a master's degree and a PhD. I graduated with my PhD as the youngest person in my program. And all along the way, with all these accomplishments, I just continued to feel like a failure, that no matter what I did or new milestone I achieved, I didn't feel like I was being acknowledged and recognized by my parents. And really at the end of the day, I didn't meet the Korean expectations. I wasn't really the daughter that they wanted or expected. So I continued to do what I knew best, which was just put my head down and achieve, because I thought if I just accomplished the next goal or the next achievement, then I will get the recognition or I'll get the acknowledgement. And, there were there were many, many positive things that came from that. I got great experience and exposure very early in my career. As part of my PhD program, I was working a full-time job at the Marriott at their corporate headquarters in Washington, D.C. I started there as an intern, and within the first month or so of my internship, they fired my manager and offered me her job. I said, sure, why not? I'll take the job. So I was placed into my first leadership job at 24 with no training or any knowledge of what that meant. I managed a team of 5 people. I was working on my dissertation, finishing my PhD coursework, and I made a ton of mistakes. And we can talk about that some other time because that would be a much longer podcast because there's a long list of mistakes. When I finished my PhD, I was offered a global leadership role with a world-class company, and I moved to Europe for 18 months, which what a great experience at that age. And I took French throughout high school, and so I got a chance to put that into practice. I was leading the most important global project for the division. I was traveling all through Europe. I had the time of my life. And before the age of 30, I was in my first VP level role. And really, the list of professional accomplishments kind of go on from there. But that isn't the point. Like, I just kept achieving, thinking that if I did X or Y, I would be fully accepted and recognized. I thought I did everything that I was supposed to do. I went to college, I went to grad school, I got a great job, I got, better jobs, I was promoted, on and on and on. But the more I achieved, really, the more I felt empty and rejected and like a failure. And at every turn, I just kept trying something different because in my mind, I just kept playing the playbook, right? It's just keep doing something, do something and get the next thing, and then it'll be better. So that was the playbook that I just kept trying over and over again. I tried everything. I would shower my parents with gifts. I would host family events and gatherings. You name it, I was doing it. If someone told me that I needed to jump off a plane or something, I probably would have done that because I was willing to do anything really to kind of get that acknowledgement. But the more I tried, the more let down and disappointed I felt. And, I really didn't feel like I was earning the recognition that I so desperately craved. And while I knew my parents were very, very proud of me, because they would tell me the stories they would relay to their friends at church, and that was really important to my parents, kind of having bragging rights at church. But they didn't show me they were proud of me. They didn't tell me they were proud of me. And they didn't do it in a way that I needed it, I think is the most important part. So instead, the message I heard was how I didn't live up to their Korean expectations. how I kept falling short. For example, I got married, which is something every Korean parent wants their children to do. But I married an American, an Irishman. He wasn't Korean. My name's Mary Choi Kelly. So, again, another reminder that I wasn't living up to their expectations. And after I got married, I was the first to have a child. And the first grandchild, my son, was a boy. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I've done it. I got married. I gave birth to the first grandchild, and it was a boy. Check, check, check. But unfortunately, because my son is not 100% Korean, he's only half Korean, I got the message that I was not meeting their expectations. And the quick backstory on this is there's a Korean tradition for boys to be given a Korean name. And I asked my dad when my older son was being born to name him and to give him a Korean name. And my dad just said to me, he said, no, he doesn't need one. And I mean, that just kills me, even just every time I retell that story, because he didn't really explain. He just said no. But I knew why he said no. And it was because he wasn't full Korean. And the tradition only applies to Korean boys. And really, it only applies to the boys of sons, because those are the boys that carry on the family name. So it was a dagger for me. And I don't know that my parents truly understand how much that really hurt me. And it still hurts me to this day. So my second son was born, and I thought, okay, great. Now I've got two boys. I didn't ask for a Korean name because I knew that that wasn't going to happen. And I accepted that I was never going to be good enough because I had taken a different path. I had carved my own path. And even though on paper it looked like I had made it, inside, I'm still that little girl translating for her parents, trying to prove her worth, looking for recognition and acceptance. And really, it took me decades to understand that no amount of achievement can replace a sense of belonging, that the validation I have been chasing is something that I could only give myself. And I really know my parents love me. They've always loved me. And I know they love me today. They loved me the only way that they knew how to provide for us, to give us an education, to make us safe, to ensure that we were healthy. And I needed something more and different. I never got the love and support that I wanted or needed. And it's not their fault. Like, I don't blame them. I don't want anyone to think that I blame my parents. I am so grateful and appreciative for all the sacrifices that my parents made, because they made significant sacrifices to provide my brothers and I the life we have today. And I truly owe them everything. And I'm also truly deeply grateful for the life my parents gave me, because it is only because of all these experiences, the good and the bad, that I am who I am today. And that's why I'm here. The why behind this podcast is that I want my kids to receive the support that they need and want from me as their mom. I want them to have the kind of support that I never received and always craved. I want my kids and their generation to grow up with a totally different script, to know they're already enough, to have the kind of encouragement, guidance, and honest conversations I wish I had. That's why Fresh Out and Figuring Out exists. So you don't have to figure it out alone. And that's my story. So let me just take a breath here, because I didn't actually realize I was going to be that emotional. I've told this story 100 times, but you can see that it's just raw every time I talk about it. And now that you know my why behind the podcast, Let me tell you a little bit more about what I hope to accomplish. Let me tell you a little more about what I'm hoping to accomplish with this podcast. So, first is I want to step into my own courage. This is really scary. Like I told you before, I've made lots of excuses and put this off for several years. And it's also really freeing because if I'm asking you to be vulnerable and authentic, then I have to go first. So that's number one. Number two, I really want to hear you, my audience of young adults. I've spent a lot of years in HR and leadership, and I can tell you that the best way to understand people is not to read about them. It's to talk to them and with them. And labels like Gen Z or millennial, I mean, they get tossed around all the time. And you're not a demographic. You're individuals. You have stories, struggles, and dreams that deserve to be told. And I don't want the filtered, polished sound bites. I want the raw truth, the late night conversations, the big dreams, the doubts, the moments you feel unstoppable, and the moments you feel lost. Because that's where the real connection happens. And the truth is, all these generational labels aside, people want the same core things. People want to feel like they're treated with respect, that they have a voice, and that they continue to have opportunities to learn and grow. So this podcast is to give the spotlight to you so you can tell your story in your own words. Number three, through this podcast, I want to rewrite a broken narrative about young men. And I want to start by being super clear. I'm a lifelong advocate for women. I've spent 3 decades advocating for women, fighting for pay equity, advancing women in leadership, and building leadership programs to lift women up. And that will never change. I mean, I've personally lived firsthand the disparate treatment, the biases, and the barriers in the workforce. And we have a lot more work to do. And that fight is in my DNA, and it's not going anywhere. But lately, I've also watched the narrative on toxic masculinity, and it's a really important issue. It gets twisted into something bigger and uglier, in my opinion, and it's turned into this idea that being male is inherently bad. And I don't believe that's true. I'm a mom of 2 boys. That is not my experience. And it's not the young men I know. The young men I know are tender, respectful, ambitious, and deeply kind. They are brothers, sons, friends who care, and they care deeply. So lifting women up and lifting men up are not opposites. They are partners in creating a future where everyone wins. And I want that future for all of us. So to summarize, the mission for my podcast kind of falls into 4 categories. Number 1, lead with courage and authenticity, showing up unfiltered and real so others feel safe to do the same. Number 2, pass the mic to young adults so that they can speak for themselves and we can truly hear them. Number 3, challenge stereotypes and rewrite harmful narratives, especially about young men. And then 4, build a community that lifts everyone up, where women and men thrive together. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining and listening. I'm so happy you are here. And let's continue to figure it out together, one episode at a time. Thanks for listening to this episode, and now it's your turn. Take what you heard today and put it into action. Share this episode with a friend who's figuring life out too. And let's build a generation of leaders who lead with heart. Follow the show, leave a review, and connect with me on social so we can keep figuring it out together. See you next time.